welcome to the Movie Zone. Today we are recapping the 2005 war adventure movie Kingdom of Heaven, loosely based on a true story. This movie tells the tale of the constant shift of power and rulers in the Holy Land of Jerusalem during the medieval era. As usual, spoilers ahead, so be ready. Let's begin. Almost 100 years since Christian armies from Europe seized Jerusalem, Europe suffers in the grip of repression and poverty. Peasants and lords alike flee to the Holy Land in search of the fortune of salvation. One knight returns home in search of his son. On the far side of a remote village located in France in 1184 AD, three men are seen digging a grave hole for a dead body of a woman. A group of crusaders walk by the grave and ask the men to clear the road for them. The three men bow down for the crusaders and do as they are asked. As the crusade leaves, showing compassion, the Baron of the Crusade sends his choir to give some money to the priest leading the two men. The dead body was the priest's brother's wife, who had died due to suicide after losing her unborn child. The priest commands the other two to cut the head of the body with an axe, while he runs off to the village. Back in the village, the local blacksmith and a former warrior Balian, the priest's brother, is haunted by the memories of his dead wife. He cannot seem to shake his mind off of her and keeps hallucinating about their time together. The priest has therefore imprisoned his brother, but upon orders from the local lord, he lets him go. Meanwhile, the crusaders from earlier reach the local castle, and there, the higher-ups talk about how the Saracens and Saladin have teamed up to take over Egypt, Syria, and all of Arabia, with now Jerusalem being their next target. One day, the crusaders from earlier come to Balian's smithy and ask him to make armors for them and their horses. Without much resistance, Balian accepts their offer. All of a sudden, Godfrey of Ibelin reveals that he is the father of Balian and asks Balian to return to Jerusalem with him. Balian, however, has lost all hope in life and everything else, and so he refuses to go alongside his long-lost father. Godfrey leaves disappointed. Balian's half-brother, the priest, had planned all of this so that he could seize Balian's property. The priest discloses that he had planned for the crusaders to come and take Balian away with them. Balian watches the man carefully and notices him carrying his wife's necklace. Enraged and tired of his half-brother, Balian proceeds to kill him before fleeing the village. Having no other option left and realizing that perhaps in the Holy Land he could find peace and forgiveness, Balian races to his father, hoping to join him on his journey to Jerusalem. Back at the village, the Lord realizes that Balian had committed murder, and the soldiers, led by Godfrey's nephew, are dispatched by Godfrey's brother to apprehend Balian. The men eventually catch up with the crusade and ask for Godfrey to hand over Balian, but Godfrey refuses to hand him over. A battle soon ensues and most of Godfrey's men are killed, while Godfrey himself is gravely wounded. However, they manage to beat the pursuers. Despite an injury that almost breaks him down, Godfrey manages to travel with Balian and the remainder of his company. They reach Messina, where Godfrey knights Balian, declaring him the new Baron of Ibelin. There are hundreds of people there gathered to set sail to Jerusalem, and Balian gets to meet with Guy de Lusignan, the prospective future king of Jerusalem. Just before the group leaves, Godfrey commands his son to serve the king of Jerusalem and protect the helpless. The Baron then succumbs to the injuries he suffered earlier. On his way to Jerusalem, a storm causes Balian's ship to go aground, leaving him and the horse as the only survivors. When Balian frees the horse from the rubble, it bolts in terror and races into the desert. Balian is accosted by a Muslim cavalier and his servant as he pursues the horse. Following a dispute over the horse, Balian kills the horseman but spares the servant, asking him to lead him to Jerusalem. The servant is pleased and tells him that his mercy will be highly rewarded. Balian gives the horse to the servant and releases him in Jerusalem. After reaching Jerusalem, he is accepted as the new Lord of Ibelin by Godfrey's retainers, the leper, King Baldwin IV, Tiberius, Marshal of Jerusalem, Princess Sibylla, King Baldwin IV's sister, and Guy de Lusignan, who is married to Sibylla. Sibylla already has a son from another man, but Guy still had married her in hopes to be the next in line to rule as King of Jerusalem rather than out of genuine love for her. As a man obsessed with achieving glory and fortune for himself, Guy is determined to dominate after Baldwin's death, and he plans to incite a war to expel the Muslims and reclaim the kingdom for the Christians. Balian settles into his estate as the Baron of Ibelin, However, upon reaching there, he realizes that the land is almost barren from lack of water, and the residents are struggling to get by. Balian quickly gets to work with the help of his knowledge of engineering. He establishes an irrigation system, working alongside his peasants so that its construction is quick and effective. This soon brings the land back to its former glory, which improves the residents' lives dramatically, and also earns him the respect and love of the people of his estate. During all of this, he is constantly visited by Sibylla, who watches him work alongside his fellow men. The two young ones, who meet almost every day, eventually fall in love with each other. In 1185, with the help of the Templars, Guy and his co-conspirator, Reynold of Chatillon, murdered a Muslim trade caravan to invoke racial hate amongst the Muslims and create unrest in Jerusalem. Upon realizing this, Saladin, the Muslim commander, heads to attack Reynold's stronghold to bring him to justice. At King Baldwin's request, Balian defends the peasants of the village that Saladin's army marches through. Despite being heavily outmanned, Balian and his knights rush Saladin's cavalry, giving the villagers enough time to flee to the castle. The battle results in defeat for Balian and his knights, and they are eventually defeated and captured. In the enemy camp, Balian runs into the servant he released in Jerusalem, Imad Adin, who reveals himself to be Saladin's chancellor. The man then repays Balian's earlier mercy by letting him leave the fort unharmed. As Saladin approaches the castle with his massive army, hoping to besiege it, Baldwin approaches him as well. The two kings then negotiate a Muslim retreat, with King Baldwin IV promising to bring Reynold to justice for his sins. But the whole ordeal of events tires out the leper-affected king. After the Muslim forces retreat, Baldwin asks Balian to marry Sibylla. However, the righteous Baron of Ibelin doesn't want to do so, as it would mean that he would have to murder Guy and the Templars. He doesn't want to bear any part of that sin and refuses the king's proposal. Shortly after, Baldwin IV passes away due to his ongoing condition, and his nephew, Sibylla's 6-year-old son, Baldwin V, succeeds his uncle as King of Jerusalem. Soon enough, the young king develops the same condition as his uncle, leprosy. Sibylla is devastated and cannot bear the fact that her son would be just like her brother, a man with no face, hidden behind a mask. She doesn't want him to suffer the consequences of ruling a kingdom, all the while holding back the pain from his sickness. Believing that lepers are all fated for eternal damnation, in a moment of utter madness, she decides to poison her son. Sibylla pours poison into his ear while he sleeps in her arms. Sibylla succeeds her son as Queen of Jerusalem. In grief and guilt of what she had done, she withdraws into private mourning and hands the crown to her husband Guy. This was what Guy had been looking for all along. As the new king of Jerusalem, Guy immediately frees Reynold, and they start their plan of war against the Muslims. Almost immediately, Reynold goes ahead and murders Saladin's sister. Guy, on the other hand, slays several of Saladin's emissaries at his castle and sends their heads back to Saladin. In 1187, the council decides to battle Saladin because God wills it, and they march into the desert, far from adequate water supplies to confront him, leaving Jerusalem undefended. Only Balian, his knights, and the inhabitants remain back in Jerusalem as the final frontier against any attack. Saladin's army attacks Guy and his forces army near Hattin, wiping out the entire army. Guy and Reynold are captured. Saladin takes no time to execute Reynold for his crimes. Saladin, however, spares Guy, as according to the Sakarkane tradition, kings are always spared from death outside of battle. Saladin's forces then make their way to Jerusalem. Back at the Holy Land, Balian prepares the fortifications in Jerusalem. There is practically no way their small force can ever defend against the large army marching their way. But even so, Balian decides that they will take on the forces with great bravery. Balian decides to knight a lot of his men in hopes that the knighthood would inspire them to fight a lot better. They decide to hold on for as long as Saladin decides to offer terms. Despite all odds, the men can hold the fort for 3 long days, and Saladin provides terms proving their resolve. Saladin offers all of Jerusalem's people safe passage to Christian regions. And finally, Balian surrenders Jerusalem to the Muslim leader. when Balian returns to the city. He informs the residents of Saladin's stipulations and assures them that they will all be safely escorted to sea. After that, Balian meets up with Sibylla and informs her about the surrender. He assures her that her brother's kingdom was in his thoughts and heart and that it could never be relinquished or lost. Sibylla inquires as to what she will do now, as she is still queen of several cities outside of Jerusalem. Balian advises her to give up her claim to the throne, and if she does, they will finally be together. On their way back to the Christian lands, a shamed and humiliated Guy confronts Balian one last time and challenges him to a battle. Balian defeats him easily and, in the end, spares him once again. Guy begs to be killed, but Balian refuses to murder a king. Saladin and the Muslims settle into their new home while Balian says his goodbye to the Muslim friends he made in the city. A lot of the Christian literature is destroyed by Saladin's soldiers, and the cross on the top of the church is replaced with a crescent. Balian discovers Sibylla once more, who has relinquished her claim to be queen of Jerusalem and other places, as well as her marriage to Guy. They stroll towards the water, holding one another's hands and smiling at each other. Balian returns to his home in France alongside Sibylla. Months later, a column of English knights rides through the village in search of Balian, as his feat in Jerusalem is now renowned all over Europe. The leader of the group introduces himself as King Richard I of England, who asked for his help to once again reclaim the Holy Land from the Muslims. Balian, however, refuses to go along with the king, wishing to return to his old blacksmith ways. The king, Richard the Lionheart, went on to the Holy Land and crusaded for 3 years. His struggle to regain Jerusalem ended in an uneasy truce with Saladin. Nearly 1,000 years later, peace in the Kingdom of Heaven remains elusive. What do you think about this gripping movie? Tell us in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. See you next time.